Welcome everybody to Preshow for Monster Monday. I am DM Gallibond, and tonight on Monster Monday we are taking a look at the Groff. But as we get ready for the show, which will be at the top of the hour, we will be back at, we will go live at the top of the hour. Okay, come on you. Let's hurry up here. There we go. Just getting my monitor all set up. Now, that's good. That's good. Okay, we are getting ready for the show, and as always, you're listening to Sirenscape, which is the preferred desktop application for all of your RPG needs. It is a great setup. It gives you all kinds of ambient music, sound effects, good for your battles, good for your exploration, good for just when your characters are kind of having a little bit of an RP scene. This is a soundscape called Friendly Tavern, and in this soundscape, of course, you can hear the musicians playing. You can hear in the background some plates clinking, mugs clinking, murmur of conversation as the patrons are enjoying the evening, and every now and then somebody will have way too much to drink, and yep, so it's got everything. This is a wonderful, Sirenscape is a wonderful tool that you can use. I love it. I use it for all of my live streams and all of the games that I run. So check them out, and we will get started at the top of the hour. In the meantime, get your questions ready for our discussion of the Groff. The Groff is another monster that comes to us from the Strixhaven Campaign, and we're going to explore all about it tonight in the show. Welcome viewers, welcome. We'll get started at the top of the hour. Hope everybody has had a good Monday, and for all those who celebrate, hope you had a lovely Easter yesterday. All right, well, hey, everybody, come with me. We're sitting pretty close to the stage here, so why don't you come over with me? There's a little table over here that's kind of by the fire. Yeah. Come on over here, and that's good. Have a seat. Yeah, it's a little quieter here. All right, and welcome everybody to Monster Monday. My name is DM Gallibond, and this is Monster Monday for April 18th, 2022. And tonight on Monster Monday, we continue looking at the monsters that comes to us out of the Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos campaign book. And tonight we are looking at the Groff. The Groff is a very interesting monster, and as you'll see, it shares some characteristics with a couple of other monsters like it, and it gives us a different spin on these. And when it comes to reskinning, we have some interesting ways that we can reskin this monster if you want to customize it. And then, of course, we have some ideas about how you can use it in your own campaign. All right, well, the Groff originated in Magic the Gathering, and it came from the Strixhaven, Strixhaven School of Mages expansion for Magic the Gathering, and it was a 2 casting cost plant dog creature. Yes, a plant dog creature. You get all kinds of weird creature types in Magic the Gathering, and this is a plant dog creature type. And the Bayou Groff is the card name. Requires 1 green mana and 1 mana of any color. And you notice it's a pretty tough, pretty beefy creature. It's a 5 power, 4 toughness creature. And because it is a very tough creature with a very low casting cost, it has to have a gimmick. So the gimmick for this one has an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, or pay 3. And, the Bayou Groff is a common monster card from that expansion. And it works well that in decks where you have a theme that does one of 2 things. You either have a theme where you have multiple mana sources, such as creatures or artifacts that can produce mana on demand, or a token deck where cards, spells, or permanents spawn tokens that count as creatures, because that lets you either use cards that you've gotten out there early for the extra mana, or it lets you get a token creature that you got out there with an early creature or an early card, and then use that to sacrifice and trade that token, which are almost always 1/1 creatures. You can trade that up for a 5/4 creature. So it gives you flexibility to get this beefy guy out into play quickly by either spinning up extra mana or sacrificing a quote-unquote free token character in order to get a bigger creature. And Groffs do not appear directly in any of the fiction release for the Strixhaven expansion in Magic. However, they're referenced in a blurb for a legendary Witherbloom character known as Willowbark, the Essence Seer. And Willowbark migrated into the D&D campaign as a named Treant, and she's listed as one of the Witherbloom faculty who teaches about medicinal herbs, cultivating pest mascots, and dissection. And on this card, we do get some flavor text, and it says, Groffs are great for tracking pests through the muck, but securing the pests before the Groff devours them is a dicey endeavor. And that is attributed to Lizette, who is a Witherbloom Dean. Alright, and then in the Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos campaign, well, what do you know? The artwork they gave us is a detail from that card. Oh, and I should go back here for a moment and remind us that the Bayou Groff artwork is by the artist Ilse Gort. And so when they created the image for the campaign sourcebook in D&D, they just took some detail from that same art. So Ilse Gort is the same artist here. And when we look in the campaign, they talk about Groffs as denizens of Sedgemoor, which is the great bog beyond the Witherbloom campus in the campaign book itself. However, there's no encounters, neither random nor scripted, that are in the campaign that include Groffs as adversaries. So it's one of these cases, and I've noticed it quite a bit in the Strixhaven book, where they have given us, they've populated the monster section of the campaign with many more monsters than they actually use in the campaign, which means that they kind of have the idea that people may want to take Strixhaven as a setting for their own homebrew games, and they give us a little bit bigger of a roster of monsters that you can use if you're going to run your own original campaign in that setting. So like a number of monsters we're exploring, the D&D team has provided us with stat blocks for creatures that can be used by DMs in that world. All right, and the description of the monster that we get in the 5th edition game is the shaggy swamp creatures have canine faces and glowing blue eyes, and they are ravenous carnivores, with pest mascots being their favorite food. And so that is how they are described in terms of their physical appearance. And of course, you know, they give us this nice image here that we can reference as well. And then in terms of the lore, out of the Strixhaven campaign, they tell us this about the Groffs. Many a Strixhaven student wandering the bayou has stepped on a seemingly mundane patch of moss, only to discover that it was the back of a hungry Groff lurking beneath the surface. And a handful of more intrepid Witherbloom mages have learned to follow Groffs in order to track down pest mascots, but most of these mages have yet to find a way to capture the pest before the Groff eats someone. So they are by no means, it's always indicated here that even though they kind of look like a dog, they're in no way imagined as being domesticated. They're completely wild, feral, and so you're not going to really be able to control them in the way that you might an animal. And even things like animal handling and some of the spells that let you communicate with animals, they won't work because almost all of those require that your target be a beast. And as we will see in the Strixhaven campaign book, the Groff is not a beast. Well, if it's not a beast, then what is it? Well, of course, it's a plant. It is a plant creature. Just like shambling mounds are plant creatures. And it does share a couple of characteristics with shambling mounds, which we'll talk about in a few moments. So, properties of plants. Plants in this context are vegetable creatures, not ordinary flora. Most of them are ambulatory, and some are carnivorous, including our friend the Groff here. The quintessential plants are the shambling mound and the treant. Fungal creatures such as gas spore and myconid also fall into this category. All right, and then we're going to take a look at the Groff in terms of its mechanics. So let's go over here and take a look at the Groff from D&D Beyond. As we see, it's a large plant. It's unaligned, has an armor class of 13, 68 hit points, has a movement speed of 30 feet, and a swim speed of 30 feet. So it can swim as fast as it walks. Stat block is fairly good, except for the 2 dump stats of intelligence and charisma. It's got a very high strength, a decent con, an average dex, an above average wisdom, but its intelligence and charisma are not very much. Now, it does have dark vision out to 60 feet and a passive perception of 13. CR4 monster. Now, it is one of these false appearance monsters, and that is one of the things that it shares with the Shambling Mound. When it is motionless at the start of combat, it has advantage on initiative rolls, and if a creature hasn't observed the Groff move or act, must succeed on a DC 18 investigation check to discern the Groff as an ordinary moss-covered bog patch. Then it also has the ability to hold its breath. It is not amphibious, but it can hold its breath for an hour, which is why oftentimes people will step on them, because they just will sort of have their complete bodies, except for part of their backs, submerged under the waters of the bog, and it kind of looks like that's a solid patch of moss to step on, but you step on it and it's actually the back of a creature. So its actions, it has a multi-attack. It can make one bite and one swamp claw attack. The bite is +7, reaches 5 feet, deals 1d8 plus 5 piercing damage. And the claw, this is another way that it resembles the Shambling Mound, if you will, is the special ability it gets with its claw attack. It's a +7 to attack, reach of 5 feet, and the damage is 1d6 plus 5 slashing. But if the target is medium or smaller creature, it must succeed on a DC 15 strength saving throw or become engulfed, and that means pulled completely inside the body of the Groff. And while engulfed, the target cannot breathe, it's restrained, and it takes 3d6 poison damage at the start of each of its turns. When the Groff moves, the engulfed target moves with it. The Groff can only have one target engulfed at a time. And the engulfed target can repeat saving throw at the end of each of its turns. On a success, the target escapes and enters the nearest unoccupied space. So, if you get attacked and basically engulfed by this, you're going to take the 1d6 plus 5 slashing damage initially, and then at the start of your next turn, you will take the 3d6 poison damage. And it is not until the end of your turn that you get to make, if you fail to save in the first place, you get to make another saving throw to try to get out. So if you fail that initial saving throw, you will take at least one round of that poison damage. And that is presuming that the Groff is not slain between the time you're engulfed and the time your turn comes around. So that is the Groff, how it appears in the campaign. And like I said, since it's not used in the campaign, that's the only information we get about it. So it's a monster from the bog that you can choose to either add to the campaign on your own if you think that things are going too easily for the PCs, or if you're setting your own homebrew campaign, either in Strixhaven or in an area that's inspired by Strixhaven, then here's a monster that you can use. And of course, also you can use it in any homebrew setting where you have a swamp, where you might want some kind of swamp creature like this. Alright, let's go on with the slides here. Alright, every week we talk about how we can use the monster of the week in encounters. And I say we always try to create a hard or challenging encounter with these creatures for a party of 5 PCs. And what level of PCs depends on the challenge rating of the monster. The Groff is a CR4 monster. So if we have a party where everybody is level 2, a single Groff is a hard encounter. It's technically just beyond the deadly threshold, but I have almost always found that a monster that is just beyond deadly is still kind of like a hard encounter and not a, not a killer encounter. You're not going to get a TPK from that against most players. Now, a level 3 party, you're going to have a medium encounter if you put one Groff against them. So if you want to bump that up to a hard encounter, you can add another plant creature called a man-trap. And you can have the Groff and the man-trap there on the field at the same time. And if the party is level 4, the Groff is going to be an easy encounter. So if you want to bump that up and make it a hard encounter, you can add a yellow musk creeper to the encounter and have that yellow musk creeper and the Groff be enemies for the PCs. And that will make it a hard or challenging encounter. Alright, so now if you are a PC or you're a player, and your DM throws a Groff out at you, presuming it's a level appropriate encounter, what are some tactics that you can use? Well, number one, watch carefully. So the Groff blends in with the bog so well it can easily be mistaken for a mundane patch of bog moss. Number two, stay nimble. If the Groff hits with a swamp claw attack, engulf a creature that fails a saving throw. And that engulfed creature cannot breathe, is restrained, and takes damage every round until it escapes. So be resistant. The Groff deals 3 types of damage: piercing with its bite, slashing with its claws, and poison when it has a creature engulfed. So the more types of damage you can resist, the longer you'll last against one of these monsters, if you have to fight it. So those are some tactics for you as players if you run into these. Now, what if you're sitting behind the DM screen? What are some tactics you can use if you want to throw one of these monsters at your players? So in the bogs that they call home, Groffs are hard to spot because they blend in with the terrain and because they can hold their breath submerged for 1 hour. So you could have one or more Groffs, and that depends on the size and level of your party. And they might ambush the PCs at the edge of a moss-choked pond, with the monsters attacking out of the water to bite, claw, and then try to engulf and pull one or more of the PCs back into the pond and underwater. So if the Groff successfully engulfs a PC, when and if the PC manages to escape, he or she must first get to the surface in order to breathe and deal with the penalties of fighting in water as laid out in the Dungeon Master's Guide. That could turn a medium encounter into one that's potentially much more difficult and much more entertaining for you, and possibly more entertaining for the players as they struggle to deal with the adversity of not being on solid ground. So most PC races out of the box don't have a great swim speed, and most PC classes out of the box don't have a great swim speed. Now obviously there's magic items that can help with that, potions and all that other kind of stuff, but you may not have those kind of items available by the time you are ready to fight a Groff at level 2, level 3, something like that. So you really can kind of take this one monster that if you're fighting it on dry land, it may be kind of a medium encounter for your party, but then by having it engulf somebody and pull it into the water, so now you've got one of your party members that's potentially underwater, engulfed by this monster, can't breathe to begin with, is restrained to begin with, and then finally makes a saving throw to get out. Well, now they're still underwater, so they still can't breathe. So now they have to try to find their way to the surface, and that can kind of give a lot more excitement, because of course if it's under the water, then the other PCs don't have a great way of spotting exactly where it is. They may have to make perception checks. You may give those to them at disadvantage. All those kinds of things, depending on how clear or how murky the water is. And if it's a bog, Bogs almost always are muddy, murky water that's choked with all kinds of vegetation and all sorts of sediment and silt that's in the water that really obscures vision and makes it hard to see where anything is that gets under the surface by more than a few inches. All right, so where would we place the Groff in a campaign? So an individual Groff by itself is a good tier 1 monster, and a pack of Groffs could cause problems for a low tier 2 party depending on how you deploy them. So bogs and swamps are great places to find these creatures, so if the PCs must travel through such areas or are sent to such a place to locate an object or hunt for magical herbs or reagents, you could have these creatures there and set up an encounter for the party. So, for example, one of the things in Strixhaven that they always do is students are always sent out to the bog to harvest herbs and medicinal plants that are used as part of the reagents or part of the ingredients for brewing potions or spell components or all kinds of other things that they are used for. And if you are setting up a campaign where maybe your home base for your party is near a bog or near a swamp or something like that, and the local alchemist needs to brew potions to help combat a disease or something, and says, "You brave adventurers, I need you to go out into the boggy mire, and I need you to bring me, so many of this kind of plant and so many of those sorts of flowers, and find the roots of these things that grow underwater, and blah, 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 blah. Bring those back, and I will create the potions that will heal all the sick townspeople." So off your party goes. One of the monsters that might be out there in that bog that they might have to contend with could be a pack of Groffs. And so that could be just yet another kind of weird, strange, fun bog monster that you could toss at your PCs and have them deal with that as a consequence of being out there. All right. And every week we always talk about how we might reskin one of our monsters that we're talking about. And the Groffs, they are a fun monster to reskin, and it's because of the quality they have of blending in with their environment. And to me, anytime I see a monster that naturally blends in with its environment, it always seems like there could be perfect elemental counterparts. So imagine, you might have lava-based Groff monsters that deal fire damage to engulfed creatures in a volcanic area. So there might be these monsters that live in the lava of the volcano, and then they jump out and they attack, and maybe they engulf a creature and they try to pull it into themselves and do that whole engulf thing. Now, I would say that a Groff like that would probably have to be a much higher CR, simply for the fact that if you're going to have a creature engulf a PC and then submerge itself under lava, it may only deal 10 or 3d6 points of damage while it's engulfed, but as soon as it gets out of that engulfment and into the actual lava, it's going to take a bunch more damage. It's like, it's something ridiculous, like 16d8 damage per round if you're in lava. I mean, it's just an insane amount of damage that lava does. So, you probably would want to make that Groff significantly more difficult. But you could have an earth or mud-based Groff monster that deals acid damage to engulfed creatures, an air or cloud-based Groff monster that deals lightning damage to engulfed creatures, and a water or ice-based Groff monster that deals cold damage to engulfed creatures. And those you might find in places like the elemental plane of fire, elemental plane of air, elemental plane of earth, elemental plane of water. And then beyond these elemental variants, you might also have variants in your games in the outer planes, or in alternate planes that blend with their surroundings and deal necrotic damage, for instance, if you had a Groff that was native to the Shadowfell, or maybe one that deals radiant damage if it is native to the Astral Sea. And then, of course, there's other kinds of damage types as your imagination sees fit. So those are some things to think about with Groffs and how you might reskin them and use them in different environments other than simply in a bog. I'm sure with a little bit of thought you can come up with all kinds of other variants as well if you think about the different energy types and the different environments that you might have in your campaigns. All right. Well, now we are going to go over here and we're going to take a look and see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions on this monitor, and I don't see any questions over here yet either. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go on into the wrap-up, and then I will check back and see if we have other questions. All right, so I have been DM Gallibond, and this has been Monster Monday, and tonight we've talked about the Groff. Now, normally I have 4 streams that I do every week, but from now until the end of April, a lot of those are on hiatus, and that's just simply because of conflicts with my schedule. There was no Walker of Waterdeep yesterday because it was Sunday. We had several players that weren't going to be able to make it for that game. We will have a Sword Coast Chronicles game on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. That is, I think we will have that game. We know of one player who's not going to be able to make it. If we have other players that cannot make it, and that's just due to their, schedule. We have one player that's moving, another player that recently changed jobs and is having to contend with a new kind of schedule and everything like that. So people are kind of getting settled into different things. Saturday Night Greyhawk, we will not play that this week. We will be back with that on the 23rd. And the Walker of Waterdeep, we will not be back to that until I think it is the 7th of May is going to be when we will be back with the Walker of Waterdeep on Sunday. And because of the conflicts that I have on Sundays from now until the end of the month, I'm traveling. There's a family wedding out of town, so I'm going to that. And we stream everything on Twitch. You find all the archives on YouTube. And you can go to the Patreon to find information about to find us there on Patreon and help us out. Throw a few bucks our way if you want to, and that will help us deal or create more content. All right. Now, I do need to tell you that next week we are going to be focusing on the college scholars from Strixhaven, but next week it will not be a live stream. Next week, it will be a YouTube premiere that will premiere at 8 p.m. on Monday night. And the following week is also going to be another YouTube premiere. Why? It is because of the fact that I am traveling. So I will be traveling next week, and I'll be traveling the week after that. So those shows are going to be pre-recorded, and they will just be set to premiere on their own on the night on the night and at the time that they go live. So find those only on the YouTube channel. There will be no live stream for the next 2 Monster Mondays. All right, let me go back and check and see if we have any additional questions about the Groff. I don't see any there, and I don't see any there. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me this evening. I am going to go ahead and bring our music back, and then I will look for somebody who is doing another D&D stream. All right, and let's go here, and then I will go to this one, and I will see who all else is streaming some D&D. All right. And okay, Endermoss is streaming some D&D, so we'll go ahead and we will raid Endermoss. Thank you guys for joining me. Hope you enjoyed tonight. Hope you will. Hope you will have a great week, and we hope we will see you on Wednesday night or again next week for Monster Monday. All right, good night, everybody, and as always, watch out for the monsters under the bed. Take care, everyone.